Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Queer and Now podcast. My name is Daisy. I use any pronouns, and yeah, welcome. This first episode is just going to be kind of a intro, what the podcast is going to be about, and a little bit about my story, my background, kind of just a little intro, get to know you kind of thing. Feel free to watch the video along with the podcast on YouTube, but the podcast itself will also be on Spotify and Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, I think. Yeah. So, welcome. So, this podcast, I wanted to start it because I think sharing experiences and stories is so important in the queer community. I feel like we never have an understanding of anyone else's story. I think there's always room to hear more, and everyone has their own story, everyone has their own background, and I think that's really important to share to people. Yeah. So, we're going to cover topics like being queer in athletics, in rural places, in urban places, in very like liberal versus conservative communities, growing up in queer families, growing up in very heteronormative families, why it's important to be queer, why how being queer affects your mental health, how people have come out and how people plan to come out. We're also going to be covering some pretty tough topics like racism and homophobia and experiences with that, people being outed, being sexualized or fetishized or over just because you identify a certain way, as well as things like dysphoria, be like choosing to be ambiguous versus choosing a hyper specific label, being neurodivergent and being queer. There's a lot of topics to be covered with queerness. I think that this is going to be very important for a lot of people. At least I hope. That's my hope for this. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my story, my background, how I got to where I am now, and we'll go from there. So I am 21. I just turned 21 just about a month ago, just over a month ago on the day that I'm recording this. And I identify as biromantic, asexual, or asexual spectrum. And then I haven't really ever put a label in my gender, but I know I'm not cisgender. That's why I use any pronouns. That's also a very new thing. I've just started to use any pronouns. Yeah. So I first started questioning my own sexuality when I think a freshman in high school. I have one very distinct memory of this, that I was sitting in my World History 1 class, or World History 2 rather. So for anyone that's not American, freshman year is, I think I was 14, 15. It's your first year of high school. And I remember so distinctly sitting in my World History 2 class and just hanging out with a bunch of people who identified as girls at the time. So I'll use the group term girls. Just know that the people that were in that group don't necessarily identify as females anymore. But me and this group of girls, we were sitting in the back of the classroom. This was at the end of the year, so we'd already taken our state tests and exams and everything. And it was probably like the second to last week of school, or maybe the last week of school. And so we were all just kind of hanging out, doing whatever. And out of nowhere, one girl goes, "Oh, we should go around and everyone like say what your sexuality is." Like that's like a normal like group discussion to have. I mean, I guess it can be, but so for context, I went to a performing arts high school. So a lot of people happen to be queer. And so we all went around, and I was kind of internally panicking at this point of like, I've never put a label on anything. I've never questioned anything. Someone who is definitely straight would never like panic in that situation. And so I'm sitting there and we're talking and everyone's going around the circle, and they get to me. I'm the last person in the circle. And everyone's like, "Oh, I'm bi. Oh, I'm gay. Oh, I'm this, that, and the other." Like, I don't really know what I am. I don't know. I like guys, but I don't know. And I was kind of expecting them to be like, "Oh, like you don't have a label," like just kind of like be really rude about it. But they just kind of brushed it off and they're like, "Okay, moving on, next topic." And I remember that whole summer after that, like going into sophomore year, my second year of high school, and like chatting with friends and everything. Like just remember so specifically like rethinking all of the relationships that I have and everything. I grew up dancing, so I was friends with girls my whole life, friends with the same girls for my whole life. And, you know, we none, as far as I was aware, none of us had ever questioned our sexuality or anything like that. That was like not a thing that we talked about as a group, you know? So I just kind of kept that under wraps. I would consider my discovery of my identity very quick compared to a lot of people, because I came out to I don't remember who I came out to first. I really couldn't tell you, but the first person I came out to, whoever it was probably early sophomore year. So I only took a couple months to really play with labels and really just like figure things out. I'm guilty of taking the Am I Gay quiz and researching all of the sexualities and all of that kind of stuff. And so once I started to like figure out my identity, become comfortable with the term bi and bisexual and all, I'd only told a couple people, but my best friend and I, we went to this like, you know, like the paint your own pottery kind of places. And I saw that they had this little like horse with wings, like a Pegasus. And I loved unicorns at the time, but they didn't have unicorns. And so I was like, oh, a Pegasus, you know, I'll just do this. So I painted the Pegasus like a light pink. I still have it on my shelf in my parents' house, but I painted this Pegasus. It was light pink. The tail was like an off-white with like rainbow flecks in it. But then the mane, like the hair, was rainbow colored just because I thought it was cool. And I painted the wings like this off-white with the rainbow flecks. And then on the side, like, you know how like on Care Bears and what was that show with the horses? I don't remember it, but there's a show with like little horses on it, you know? My Little Pony. And so, you know how on like My Little Pony, they had like the little like imprint of that showed like Applejack had a little apple on the hip, you know? And so where that would be, I wrote the word pride in black. And when I brought it home like a week later, because you have to wait a week for it to fire. But when I brought it home a week later, I showed it to my mom and she was like, oh, that's cute. And the first thing she asked me, and she was like, are you gay? And like immediately I was like, oh my God, like she knows. I've come out to like 3 people and she knows. And I didn't know like kind of what my mom thought on the whole thing. I was like really nervous that she was going to be like, yeah, you're kicked out. But I just told her, I was like, no, I'm just a really big ally. My favorite. I'm just an ally. And so I didn't tell her for a while. Not my oldest cousin, but I think he's my 3rd oldest cousin. I don't know. One of my cousins, anyways. He's gay. He's had a couple boyfriends that he's brought home to the family. Like everyone knows that he's gay. Like I was told that he was gay when I was when I was young. I was probably, if he sees this, he can fact check me. Feel free. But because I don't remember. But I think I was probably like 11 or so, maybe 10 or 11 when I found out that he was gay. When he came out when I guess word had spread. I don't know if he came out specifically to my parents or what, but I was around that age when I found out. So I kind of knew in the back of my head that like my parents were like at least a little bit accepting of it. And so I wasn't like scared necessarily of like getting kicked out and then like them not loving me anymore. But it was more of just like I think everyone that comes out feels this fear of like that person that you're coming out to, because it's a very vulnerable thing, coming out to them and like them just immediately shutting you down or, you know, saying that it's wrong or like all the negative things that you could possibly think of. And so the way I came out to my mom, I came out to her over the summer, I think, and I came out to her through a card. Some people have come out over the phone. Some people have come out using like birthday cakes. I've seen like so many different ways of doing that. And I was researching. I was like, how do I come out to my mom without directly saying it? And so I made this little card. I've always liked making handmade gifts for people. I've always just been a big fan of that. And so I made this little card. I took a regular piece of like printer paper, folded it in half. And on the top of it, I colored it in the bisexual flag colors. These colors, if you're unaware. So the pink, blue, and purple, or pink, purple, and blue rather. And I colored the front of it in the flag, so it looked like the flag. And then I think I'll have to ask my mom if she still has it. I'm sure she does. But I think I had written in like a cursive like script bisexual or something on the front. And inside the card, I wrote this little note to my parents. It said like, "Dear Mom and Dad," and it said something along the lines of, "This is how I identify. I still like guys, but I also like girls." And me being, I think I came out when I was like 14, 15, maybe 16. I don't remember. But I wrote in there something along the lines of, I would consider myself biromantic just because I don't really have sexual feelings for those people, like as far as I'm concerned. Spoiler alert. But I wrote that to my mom and I left it on the counter, and it was just this little note that said, "This is who I am. I'm still the same person, but this is who I like. This is kind of my attraction to other people." And I left it downstairs. I did this at like 11 or 12 a.m., 11 p.m., 12 a.m., really late at night. And I left it on the counter. And so when I came downstairs for breakfast the next morning, I want to say that I had a dance rehearsal or something like that because I came down in the morning, which I never do. So I came downstairs and my mom came over to me and she said, like, "How'd you sleep?" Like just the normal mom conversation. And then she brought up the card that I left and she said, "I read your card." And immediately, like, my heart starts beating a little bit faster. I start panicking of like, what is she going to say to me? I'm terrified. And she said, I read your card. I just want to hear from you specifically, like what that label means to you, what your identity is. I want to hear it personally. And so I sat down with her at the kitchen table and I explained to her kind of my identity and what it means to me. And she said, "You said the term biromantic. What does that mean?" And I said, "I just have never felt sexual feelings for anyone. I'm 16 or however old I was. And so, feeling sexual feelings is never something that I've experienced. So personally, I would use the word biromantic, but I just say bisexual still now, just because it's easier." But I basically told my mom that I'm still the same person. And I basically told my mom that, like, I'm still the same person. I'm still like her youngest, her favorite child, her favorite child. If my sister is listening to this, sorry. But, it's just being very sincere and trying to make her understand that I'm still the same person and I haven't changed at all. It's just, I'm exposing her to a different part of my personality and a different part of me. And so she gave me a hug and she said, "I still love you. I still accept you. I'm not going to be negative about it." And that was that. We just kind of, nothing really happened. And for a while, still now, she's getting better about it. But for a while, still now, like she says like, "Oh, when are you going to get a boyfriend?" Or, talks about boys specifically and doesn't ever really like use the term partner or girlfriend or anything like that. But it's not something I hold against her. It's natural. You kind of expect people to be straight. Unfortunately, we live in a very heteronormative society, but whatever. That's not what we're talking. And so over the next couple years, high school, going into college, nothing really happened with my sexuality, with my gender, anything like that. I just kind of lived my life, finding girls and guys attractive. And that was that, like, whatever. When I went to college, a big part of college, especially when you're a freshman, is, hookup culture, like, finding a boyfriend, that whole thing. And a lot of people expect you to go out with people every single night or like go party or whatever. The college that I used to go to was a very small university. I was very focused on my studies. I was set to graduate in 3 years instead of 4. I was in like a very advanced program. So really had literally no time for anything else. Like, even if I wanted to date somebody, even if I had a crush on somebody, like I really didn't have time for it. And I hate saying that, but it's true. So as kind of the years went on, I had crushes on people, but I never really acted on them except for one person, but we don't talk about that. Long story that maybe I'll tell that story another time, but it was just a regular crush until about a year ago. So it's 2022 right now. So about 2020, I want to say 2020 to 2021. COVID hit, the whole shut down. And so I started watching Twitch streams and got back into Minecraft YouTube and that whole thing. And there were a lot of streamers that I watched that were openly queer and that openly identified as a lot of different things. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, this representation is really cool. And I can't pinpoint exactly when I started feeling this way, but I definitely remember probably about a year and a half ago, I started to realize that, you know, I don't feel sexual attraction to people. I don't feel that way, you know. All my friends are talking, and my sister included, like talking about like the guy that they just hooked up with, or the girl they just hooked up with, or talking about, oh, my boyfriend's coming to visit and we're long distance, so, you know, my roommate's staying out of the room this weekend, you know, being like very clearly like having sexual relationships. And, you know, while I was like, oh, I'm so happy for you, that's so exciting, or supporting them in any way, it was never something that I desired or something that I ever wanted. And so I was like, you know, maybe that's just whatever. Maybe I'm broken. Like maybe I literally don't feel sexual attraction because something's wrong with my brain. And I think a lot of asexual or aspec or aromantic arospec people feel that way, of like your brain is broken or something inside of you is wrong. And so I really struggled with that for a very long time of, oh my God, like something's broken within me, or, you know, my brain isn't working the right way. But I never brought it up in therapy. I never brought it up with my psychiatrist or anything like that, because I was like, it's a problem for later. And then I found, I think the first openly asexual creator that I ever watched was Shubble, or like Shelby. And I remember watching the interview she did with Anthony Padilla, which was, I think, about a year ago or so. And her and a couple other people did this interview with Anthony Padilla about being asexual. So he did like, I spent a day with asexual people. And I remember watching that video and just kind of like, you can do that. Like, you can just identify as something else, or you can identify as like never feeling that attraction. Like, that's crazy. And it was, when I watched that interview, like, it was very comforting, I guess, which is never a term that I thought I would use for someone talking about their sexuality. And, you know, I love hearing people talk about their sexuality stories and their gender stories and their journeys and everything. But I never thought that it would feel comforting because I related to it. And at the time I didn't realize that it was because I related to it. But I remember watching that interview with Anthony and Shelby and watching it and like, you know, the things that she's describing are things that I understand and that I've experienced and that I understand and I get it. And maybe that's me. And so I started like looking up definitions for things and all that kind of stuff. And I remember one day just kind of like, maybe saying it out loud will help. And so I said out loud, I am asexual, and I almost cried. Like, it just felt so like warm and fuzzy inside, I guess. And for a while I was like, well, you know, because I have kind of that thought in the back of my head that, you know, my parents had told me, and that my friends had told me, and my grandparents, and even like my pastor at church, like, oh, you just haven't met the right person, you know? And so for a while, I exclusively identified as demisexual, which is on the asexual spectrum. It just means that you only feel sexual attraction for people that you're emotionally involved with. So like, I couldn't do a hookup. If I identified as demisexual, I couldn't do like a random one night stand hookup kind of thing. It would be a situation where I have to have a very deep emotional connection with this person, and like, it would have to be like a friend or even my best friend. For some people, like, it has to be that. And then, you know, I thought for a while, after I kind of got over that, I was like, well, maybe it's just because, you know, when I grew up in the church, and it's just like, I'm still stuck in the whole like waiting till marriage thing, which I know now isn't the case. It's just how I am. But for a while I was like, that's what it is. Like, I'm so stuck in this mindset of like, I have to wait until I marry someone to have sexual feelings towards them, when that is not the case. Most of the time with people in that kind of situation, they're probably having those sexual feelings. They're just not acting on them. And meanwhile, I wasn't having any of those kind of feelings about people, but I was still convinced, you know. And so I kind of left it for a while. I didn't want to focus on it. I didn't want to think about it. I was like, it's whatever. It's not a big deal. It's not important right now. And so I want to say it was just a couple months ago when I finally really started to get comfortable with just saying that I was ace. Mainly, I started saying it mainly because it was easier just to explain to people. But then, as I started to say it more, it started to feel more comfortable for me. So I still have the demisexual flag hanging up in my room because I don't want to buy another flag. But for a while, I was like very convinced that it was my sexuality. But so for some people, they have a specific label for, like me, I have a specific label for my romantic attraction and my sexual attraction. Some people have one kind of overarching label. Some people have no labels. Labels are very up to the specific person. So, my gender is like a whole nother story. It's still being written. It's still being processed. I don't really, like I said in the beginning, I don't really have a label for it. I feel most comfortable right now with the label gender queer, but that's just me. That's just right now too. I could wake up tomorrow and say that label doesn't fit me anymore and find something else. But that's just kind of where I am right now. I really want to emphasize that sexuality, romantic identity, gender, all of this kind of stuff is always changing because we as people are always changing. You meet another person, maybe you meet the love of your life and you've identified your whole life as straight, but you meet your soulmate. If you believe in soulmates, you meet your soulmate and say you identify as a woman, as a cis woman, and you meet your soulmate and they're your soulmate, but it's another woman. Like, you can wake up and just decide that something is different. I'm not saying that sexuality is a choice. Let me clarify, because sexuality is not a choice. Gender is not a choice. It's a deep-rooted, like, psychological thing. But it's just very important to keep an open mind when it comes to that kind of thing. I am never, at least I try not to be super set in my identity in any way, because it's always changing. I could wake up tomorrow and say, I am not an introvert anymore, which isn't going to happen. But theoretically, I could wake up tomorrow and be like, I am not a nice person anymore, and just decide to be a mean person or whatever. These are terrible examples, but just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I try to be as open as possible and as understanding as possible with my sexuality and with my identity, because I know that everyone has their own kind of journey and everyone is in a different part in their own journey. And so I like to field people's questions. I think it's important to always be mindful and understanding of what's to come, and also how other people identify. And I like hearing other people's stories. That's why on this podcast, I'm going to have so many guests, mainly my friends, probably to start, but I would love to have people that I've never met before, people that maybe other people know and look up to, but just, I want to hear as many people's stories as possible. And I want to hear people's opinions on things and just be able to provide a space where people can talk freely about their sexuality, their identity, their gender, however they identify, and have a space for them to be able to talk about that kind of thing freely without any kind of worry that someone's going to discriminate against them or maybe say something that they don't like. I just want this to be an open space where people can hear other people's journeys and stories and maybe find something new about themselves. Maybe listening to my story is going to help someone realize that, oh, I am asexual, or, oh, maybe I'm not cisgender or whatever. I think that sexuality is a very tough concept to talk about, or let me rephrase that. Sexuality has become a tough topic to talk about, and it's always been very taboo and very kind of hush hush, but it really shouldn't be. It's part of everyday life, and it's not something that is gross or weird or should be looked down upon. It's just kind of part of life. You're not gonna say that two cisgender people living their life as a married couple, like a man and a woman, are weird or gross, but a lot of people will say that about a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, or a non-binary person and another non-binary person, or whatever kind of combination you want to put together, just because it's not the norm. So I think breaking that stigma and that wall down is really important, and I really want to try to aim to do that more. Just it's very important, and it's a very important thing to emphasize, and it's something that I think I want to keep pushing, especially with this podcast. Yeah. So, yeah. I've also realized that I haven't talked like anything about my actual like personality, my background, anything like that. So, like I said, I'm 21. I am technically a fourth year in college, a senior, but I don't know when I'm graduating. I'll probably have another year, but we'll see. I am a psychology major, so that's my main course of study. And then right now I have declared a LGBT and queer studies minor. That's what it's called, but I just call it queer studies. That's my minor, so that's kind of like my secondary course of study. And then I'm looking into possibly continuing a religion minor that I'd started, and or doing a women's studies minor, but I'm kind of going away from that one just because it just doesn't seem like something I'd be super interested in anymore. But I am very passionate about psychology. I'm very passionate about queerness, queer studies, queer history, queer futures, working with queer people. I want to go into therapy. I want to go into counseling. I think everyone should have a therapist. I think everyone should be able to spend 45 minutes every week or every couple of weeks or however often you go and just talk to someone about what's going on in your head, because it's hard. You're like, living life is hard enough, and then not having anywhere to kind of talk about that makes it 10 times harder. So I want to work specifically with adolescents and young adults that identify as queer, or however they choose to identify, because I think that's an underserved population. And I think it's important that they have professionals, specifically mental health professionals, that understand what they're going through and understand the questions that they're asking, and understand and know how to answer those questions and help them through these difficult situations. Because oftentimes they are seeing practitioners like myself. I love my therapist, but I see a therapist that is cisgender. She's straight. She's married to a man. Like, she doesn't experience the kind of questioning that I went through and that I'm going through. And I think it's important for young adults to be able to relate to their doctors, especially mental health counseling in any fashion. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode. Sorry, it was just kind of me rambling for 30 minutes, but I hope you guys look forward to more topics. If you have topics that you want me to talk about, feel free to put them in the YouTube comments or tweet at me. I am at Daisy Not Quake everywhere. I'll put that somewhere on the screen. Yeah. I hope you guys look forward to more episodes, and because I know I do. And hearing other people's stories and hearing about what it's like to be queer. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.